This should be front page news. Two hideous crimes, which again proves Israel's genocidal intent. But it's not the chant of a musician at a music festival about the genocidal army responsible for these crimes. So there's no outrage, there's no uproar, there's no disgust, certainly not from the Western media. Let's start with this. It's a story which Sky News, to their credit, have run. It's always been the case that you've got examples of good journalism which appears in Western media outlets. The problem is too few and too little prominence. And of course, subsumed, overwhelmed by all the structural issues which I've talked about at length in terms of whitewashing Israeli crimes, deferring to Israeli lies, dehumanizing Palestinians, treating their lives as worthless, and so on and so forth. So you'll get these examples of really good, commendable journalism, and yet, of course, they're buried. They're not, of course, shared or given due prominence across the rest of the media. Let's just talk about this. So this is an interview with an Israeli reservist who served in Gaza. He told Sky News that IDF troops killed Palestinian civilians at random, with orders to shoot sometimes dependent on the mood of the commander. Let's have a listen.
An Israeli reservist who served in Gaza has told Sky News IDF troops killed Palestinian civilians at random, with orders to shoot sometimes dependent on the mood of the commander. The IDF strongly denies the claim, saying it operates against military targets, not civilians. Our international correspondent, Alex Rossi, has the story for us.
I think everything in war is kind of messes you up.
It is rare to hear Israeli soldiers speak openly about their time in Gaza. But after 3 tours of duty, this reservist says his conscience won't let him stay silent.
Every commander can choose for himself what he does, so it's kind of like Wild West. And so some commanders can really decide to do war crimes and do bad things and like don't have very consequences of that.
He agreed to talk on condition of anonymity, fearing he could be labelled a traitor or ostracised at home. These photos were taken while he was serving in Gaza, where he was stationed in the homes of displaced Palestinians.
I think you can't be in this scenario for so long and not like normalize it and not like kind of you lose your mind and then killing is more and more normalized and you can't see the problem in it. Kind of feel like I took part of something bad, and so I think it's like I need to counter it with something good that I do. And I hope that by speaking of it, it can change like how things are being done. And I think a lot of people, if they knew exactly what's happening, they wouldn't. It wouldn't go down very good for them, and they won't agree with it.
Alex Rossi, Sky News, Jerusalem.
On one level, this is deeply frustrating because anyone who doesn't think that the Israeli army is routinely massacring Palestinian civilians every single day is akin in terms of not believing reality to someone who thinks the earth is flat, with the quite important caveat that flat earthers are monumentally wrong, to say the least, but not completely morally bankrupt. Now, we've got a mountain of testimonies from Palestinians themselves about being massacred, about their loved ones being massacred by the Israeli army. But there is a refusal to treat Palestinians as even human in our media, and thus those testimonies are not accepted for what they are. Now, it's notable, actually, that we have testimonies from Israeli soldiers long before 7th October 2023 about their random murder of Palestinian civilians. Back in 2015, for example, The Guardian covered testimony from an Israeli soldier who testified about the 2014 assault on Gaza. Most of our shooting was random. We didn't think about civilian casualties. The Israeli newspaper Haaretz, a few days ago, of course, carried testimony from Israeli soldiers and Israeli army officers that the army there had deliberately fired at Palestinians near aid distribution sites run by the so-called Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, an Israeli-American fund which is in no way designed to actually meet the humanitarian needs of the Palestinian people. Around 650 plus Palestinians have been murdered in these massacres, over 4,000 injured. That's the numbers that we know about in any case. Now, this is only one crime, of course, one heinous crime, don't get me wrong, in the overall abomination that is Israel's genocide in Gaza. Yet, despite overwhelming and incontrovertible evidence that the Israeli military, the IDF, is deliberately massacring starving, unarmed Palestinians, that it has murdered hundreds by this method alone, day after day, there is no mass coverage across the Western media. It is, at best, buried. Dare I even tell you what the coverage would be, or suggest what the coverage would be, if hundreds of unarmed Israeli civilians were being massacred in these last few days? I mean, this alone is 7th of October massacres in terms of the numbers and the proportion of the numbers of Palestinians being killed in Gaza, which has a much smaller population, of course, than Israel. Now, when there's coverage, we are treated to derange attacks on the English language, like this from the Washington Post, and this headline is quite something. Foreseeable flaws in Gaza aid project led to shooting of Palestinians. I should note there is really important evidence in this article about the Israeli military slaughtering civilians. Louisa Lovelock is one of those on the byline. She's done really superb, excellent journalism, actually, in terms of what Israel is doing to the Palestinian people. The headline reveals the chosen framing by newspaper editors about stories they're burying. I mean, this is ludicrous. We're talking about the massacre of civilians. This is, I mean, imagine, again, I don't really need to spell it out. If this was Israeli civilians being massacred in this way, starved, deliberately starved Israeli civilians, we had to enter a new parallel universe. I get it. You would not get newspaper headlines like, I mean, just imagine. I mean, speaking of this kind of framing, after Israel dropped a massive bomb on a cafe in Gaza last week, which was bustling with civilians, students, artists, football players, which of course the Israeli military would have known before they attacked it. And this is really important. They know exactly who's there. They can see who's there before they attack. It's not like these are just like random bombs. This is a very sophisticated military, as they will say themselves. They know almost exactly, in fact, they'll know exactly how many people are there. They can see who they are before they attack. It's worth making that point. You know, it's not like bombs just being dropped like in the Blitz in London. Now, the BBC headline was Israel strike and bustling Gaza cafe killed a Hamas operative, but dozens more people were killed. Could you imagine if there was a Hamas attack which killed dozens of Israeli civilians, but there was a claimed IDF soldier or officer there? Could you even imagine Hamas strike and bustling Israeli cafe killed an IDF operative, but dozens more people were killed? It is literally impossible to imagine such a headline. If such a headline ever existed in such circumstances, it would trigger immediate wall-to-wall firestorm. It would be a national scandal, probably involving overwhelming demands for the BBC Director General to resign. The fact we can take that for granted, you know what I'm saying is true. We just take it as read that Palestinian life in our media means nothing. It is the tiniest fraction, at the very least, of what is considered a life like us, Israel, Western. The most shameless, gratuitous racism imaginable. And then there's this news story. The headline in the Israeli newspaper Haaretz is Defense Minister says Israel plans to concentrate all Gaza's population in humanitarian zone built on Rafah's ruins. They put, rightly, as we'll discuss, humanitarian in scare quotes. The article explains Defense Minister Israel Katz said Monday that he has instructed the IDF to prepare a plan to establish a humanitarian city on the ruins of Rafah, which would eventually house the entire population of the Gaza Strip. According to Katz, the plan involves moving 600,000 Palestinians, primarily from the Al-Muwazi area, into the new zone after security screening. Once inside, residents would not be allowed to leave, the Defense Minister said. Concentrating Gaza's entire civilian population in a small confined camp from which they cannot escape. Yes, well, we do actually have a term for that in the English language, a term you will be very familiar with. This is known as a concentration camp. That is literally what it is. That is inarguable. I have just outlined what a concentration camp is. As for humanitarian zone, this is grotesque Orwellian subversion of language. We already know what the Israeli state means by humanitarian, given the experience of the so-called Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, which involves pulling Gaza under a total siege for months, then allowing in far too little aid, much of it unusable, with no proper, efficient distribution system of any description. Instead, just genocidal soldiers massacring starving civilians by the hundred as they desperately try and get whatever food they can. Now, we know about the genocidal intent of Israel Katz, the defense minister, because he's made it abundantly clear over and over again. Earlier this year, he said the following in a blood-curdling video. Citizens of Gaza, this is your last warning. The first Sinwar ruined Gaza and the second Sinwar will destroy it completely. The Air Force attack against Hamas terrorists was only the first step. The rest will be significantly worse and you will pay the price. Soon evacuation from the fighting zones will resume. Unless all the Israeli hostages are released and Hamas is expelled from Gaza, Israel will act with forces never before seen. Take the US president's advice. Return the hostages and expel Hamas, and other options will be presented to you, including relocating to other places in the world for those who wish. The alternative is utter destruction and devastation. He didn't even try to hide his genocidal intent. Indeed, the Haaretz article says the following. In a briefing with reporters, Defense Minister Israel Katz said Israel aims to weaken Hamas by targeting its leadership, seizing territory, demilitarizing the Gaza Strip, and implementing what he called the emigration plan, which will happen. He added that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is already leading efforts to explore countries willing to absorb Gazans. We're talking about humans here, by the way. Forcibly removing an entire people from their homeland is wantonly, unapologetically genocidal. It means the Palestinian people of Gaza will no longer exist. That is it. Their whole history, going back thousands of years, comes to an end. Like that, gone. Now, that's despite, I should note, Haaretz reporting that other countries so far are resisting participation in this genocidal plan. As Michael Sfard, a Israeli human rights lawyer, told The Guardian, Katz laid out an operational plan for a crime against humanity. It is nothing less than that. It is all about population transfer to the southern tip of the Gaza Strip in preparation for deportation outside the Strip. While the government still calls the deportation voluntary, people in Gaza are under so many coercive measures that no departure from the Strip can be seen in legal terms as consensual. When you drive someone out of their homeland, that would be a war crime in the context of a war. If it's done on a massive scale like he plans, it becomes a crime against humanity. Professor Amos Goldberg, the Israeli historian of the Holocaust based over in Jerusalem, one of several Israeli genocide scholars to have concluded that Israel's committing genocide against the Palestinian people. There's a consensus of genocide scholars in Israel and elsewhere that this is genocide. Also told The Guardian these plans constitute the creation of a concentration camp or transit camp for Palestinians before they expel them, adding it is neither humanitarian nor a city. He goes on, a city is a place where you have possibilities of work, of earning money, of making connections and freedom of movement. There are hospitals, schools, universities and offices. This is not what they have in mind. It will not be a livable place, just as the safe areas are unlivable now. There are no pretenses here. No pretenses at all. This is a genocide being committed very openly in front of the whole world. But these stories I tell you, they get some coverage in some areas of the Western media. No deafening outrage from politicians, no emergency debates in Parliament, no front pages of newspapers screaming condemnation, not leading news bulletins with this huge urgency. That is, of course, reserved for chants at music festivals about the perpetrators and non-violent direct action groups opposed to genocide. The world can only be turned on its head for so long. We will keep speaking out about the crime of the century, and one day there will be justice. There will be accountability for those who made these heinous crimes possible. Please like and subscribe, leave your thoughts and your comments, help us take on the pro-genocide media at patreon.com/owenjones84. Share the video and listen to us on the podcast if you prefer, wherever you get your podcasts, Owen Jones Podcast. Speak to you in a bit.